I am joining you on this webinar today from a hotel room in northern Kentucky, just outside Cincinnati. This evening and over the next couple of days, I'm going to join some community action folks and other folks from around the country at a site visit at Brighton Center, which operates two-generation whole family approaches. And I'm really excited because I'm going to be on the ground seeing some leadership and organizational culture and that kind of thing today in a local place. So I look forward to sharing what we learn here with others in the weeks and months to come. So we have a jam-packed agenda for ourselves today to talk about leadership and give you some tools and some processes to use to help further any shifts that you're trying to make for whole family approaches or perhaps other kinds of strategies, other kinds of change efforts you have underway in your community action agency. We always like to start these webinars off. The partnership likes to focus everybody on the promise, and so I'm just going to quickly read the promise, and you can do that at your station there at the agency. So community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. So this webinar and most of the webinar Wednesday knowledge building sessions that we have are really brought to you by the Learning Community Resource Center. And that is an effort at the partnership to really build innovative practice, build capacity of community action agencies to address poverty. And the Learning Community Resource team is there on your screen, and it consists of Gerald Crocker, Tiffany Marley, Zandy McKinley, Liza Porras, and you heard from Courtney Kohler here as we kicked off the webinar, and myself as a subject matter expert, mostly in the space of whole family approaches and building capacity to pursue whole family approaches and make that shift in your practice. So I'm going to kind of lead you today in some thinking on leadership. And our agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the desire that many community action agencies have now to increase impact and do better than we've ever done before, and how leadership is really central to that desire, and go over a couple of proven processes that you can use as leaders as you promote change and pursue different kinds of practice. We'll go deeply into Kotter's 8 steps and his dual operating system. We'll go over sort of the first 3 steps of Kotter's process, which is establishing a sense of urgency, creating a guiding coalition, developing a change vision. We're going to apply those first 3 steps to the whole family approach, and then also think a little bit about how collective impact can also help with your leadership challenges as you work in the community and with partners. So I thought what we do sort of to kick ourselves off today and kind of get in the mindset of leadership is to just all sort of think for a minute. I think there's, over 30 of you on the call today on the webinar. Just think a little bit about leaders that you currently work with or leaders that you've worked with over your career, your life, not just work, but even maybe in your personal life. And consider some good leaders, folks that you really felt like did a good job of leading, folks that you were interested in following. And who was that? And why do you consider them a good leader? What is it about their leadership that you found motivating and creating a desire in you to sort of follow them and pursue the agenda that they were laying out? So I'm going to give you a minute just to reflect on that. And if you would, I'd like for you to make some notes in the chat box and send those thoughts to the presenter and the host, as Courtney mentioned. But just who in your life have you seen that's a good leader, and what made them a good leader? And you can just sort of do stream of consciousness, different words that may give some insight into what makes a good leader and who you've seen that's a good leader. So I'm going to stop while you go to the chat box for just a minute and give us some feedback. And actually, I think I said send it to presenter and host, but you can send it to everyone. You can do all so that everybody can kind of see if you feel comfortable with that. So here we have somebody saying, somebody who was forward thinking, not stuck in the past, compassionate. When I was thinking about this today, I was thinking about folks who are trustworthy and visionary, who have high ethics. What else are folks thinking about when they think about good leaders? Integrity, completely. What else? Any other thoughts? Inspiring and motivating. A good leader listens more than they talk. Great. Good point.
We had one come through the Q&A box as well. Provides a compelling vision of what is possible, that is doable, not unattainable.
Good, good. We're going to talk about vision, and I think it's good to have a vision, but it's good to have a vision that's obtainable. So that's a really good point.
Another one says, see the big picture and not a narrow focus.
Good. Big picture. All right. So as we go through today and we think about some of these processes for helping to promote good leadership, continue to sort of think about the leaders that you've worked with and your leadership and, what resonates. And I see that somebody just posted open and innovative, and those are also good qualities. Okay, so just to set a little background and context, I am so privileged to be out in the country meeting with a lot of different community action agencies, state associations, state community service block grant offices, and as I was at OCS, I got to meet and talk with a lot of different community action leaders. And one thing that I think is sort of emerging and that it's out there if you talk about taking a pulse of what's going on in the network is that there really is a very strong desire among community action professionals to really achieve a bigger impact than we've ever achieved before. Folks are really, I think, trying to think about how to do better for people and how to find new solutions to complex problems. So there's a real desire to increase impact. And when you look at the levels of poverty, the number of people in deep poverty, infant mortality, our incarceration rates, when you look at some of the really difficult challenges that we're dealing with out there, I think it really does create a sense of we've got to do better. We've got to increase our impact. We all know that the world is really complex these days, too, and it's constantly changing. And we may not be able to predict the future, but we can certainly prepare for it. So I think folks are looking for new solutions, and I think we probably appreciate more today than ever that no one program or one organization is going to have the wisdom, gifts, experience, and skills necessary to really solve these current and future complex challenges. So that really is compelling a lot of folks, I think, to think about redirecting their strategies. And we're sort of proposing with the whole family approach that we're doing a lot of work around as part of the learning community, that redirecting strategy from program results to creating conditions where the whole agency participates in developing solutions can really make a difference and help increase impact. And so redirecting strategy means change or equals change, and change really requires new levels of leadership and perhaps deeper and more intensive leadership than we've ever needed before. Redirecting strategy looks different ways at different agencies, and I recognize that not everybody on this webinar today is perhaps pursuing the whole family approach to their practice. Folks may be implementing collective impact efforts, maybe trying to improve equity, social innovation efforts, trauma-informed care. There's a lot of different strategies folks are pursuing. And regardless of those, leadership is needed because you're probably embarking on some kind of change. So we're going to really talk about leadership in depth today. And part of the motivation here is that when we're out and about and we're talking to folks about adopting a whole family approach or using collective impact or any of these things, we always hear folks talk about, well, how are we going to shift the organization? How are we going to create buy-in? How are we going to change our policies, change our practices? And really, a lot of that is dependent on leadership. And so I wanted to talk a little bit today about leadership as really enabling others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty. And leadership being more of a practice and not a position. Any of us at any level of an organization or a network can be a leader. And part of that is earning authority and respect and trust and some of the things that you all mentioned in your opening chats. Leadership is really about developing others and not just yourself, and helping others to learn and grow. It's really grounded in our values and our interests and our assets. And it's a lot about building relationship. And we're going to talk a lot today about processes that help build relationships that will help create change and help folks to succeed. So we're going to talk about urgency, and we're going to talk about overcoming a lot of the things that keep us in place and keep us from changing. So whether it's inertia or apathy or fear or isolation or self-doubt, we can overcome those with what we're calling action motivators. Urgency, creating a sense of urgency, which we're going to talk a lot about today, can really get people to move and can overcome inertia. Creating some anger, which also tapping into some anger, which can overcome apathy. Sometimes people have fear of change, and really tapping into a sense of hope about the future and about a vision can overcome fear. Creating some solidarity instead of isolation can motivate folks, and helping folks to really believe that you can make a difference. That last one is YCMAD, is you can make a difference. and helping people believe that together we can make a difference, can overcome some self-doubt that's out there about success and change. So really increasing impact, accelerating change requires leaders in community action to help their staff, to help board members, to help other stakeholders commit to a shared vision. And maybe that's a vision for your agency or a vision for a particular approach, maybe your whole family approach. Leaders need to understand how to harness the wisdom, gifts, and skills of the team to solve complex challenges. And then leaders really have to promote learning. And somebody mentioned listening. A good way to learn is to listen, and for all of us to listen more and learn more. And then pursuing outcomes and continual improvement. So those are the kind of different aspects we're going to talk about today in a couple of different ways. So I'm going to use some slides here in this next section where we're going to talk a little bit about John Kotter's 8 steps of leading change. And he has written several books on leading change. If you haven't read any of Kotter's stuff and you're sort of looking at how to embed change and successfully create change, adopt a whole family approach, or adopt social innovation, I really recommend that you read and think about applying Kotter's 8 steps. And we're going to talk about the first 3 steps today. I hope that will be enough to get you interested in then looking at the other steps and thinking about using this. So we all know change is hard. And, according to Kotter's research, 70% of change efforts fail. And we know this. We've seen it. We've all experienced poor or unsuccessful change efforts. And what's important to know about that is that once you've tried to implement a change and it's failed, it's much harder to go back and try to do that change again. So we want to really think about, we don't want to get caught in change fatigue or in an unsuccessful effort. And so we want to really use proven processes. So Kotter's steps are proven. They've been used a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. And so we're going to suggest that you use Kotter's process for your successful change. What this will do, it will help you to garner many more change agents in your organization. As I said, leaders exist at all levels, and leadership is a choice. And so we really want to tap into as many leaders as we can. We really need to model change and not force change upon others. And so Kotter's process allows us to do that. So just quickly, I know a lot of you that have studied for CCAP have thought pretty deeply about management versus leadership. But Kotter sort of starts out with reminding us that those are 2 different things. And obviously we need both. But when you're really embarking on a change effort, when you're trying to change culture, change practice, the larger the change, the more leadership that's required. Leadership is really about establishing direction, aligning people, motivating, and inspiring, as many of you noted when we started the webinar, versus planning, budgeting, organizing, implementing, controlling, directing, all those typical management types of roles and functions. And so you need both, but we're going to talk today about leadership. So here's Kotter's 8 steps. And so step 1 is really establishing a sense of urgency. It's hard to get any kind of change effort off the ground if you don't create some urgency. So we'll talk about that today. Creating a guiding coalition, figuring out a vehicle, a network of people to move the change is critical, and developing a change vision. So we're going to sort of talk about the first part, the foundation, creating a climate for change. And then hopefully you can do some self-study and look at some of the other steps that are in Kotter's process. So when people ask me about, well, how do we get staff buy-in? We're going to need to train staff. We're going to need to think about our work in a different way if we're pursuing a whole family approach or some other type of change. I always say that, it's really how you start, how you get started really matters, because if you do these first 3 steps well, it's going to really save you time down the road and help you to get to success. So let's look at these a little bit more closely. So, Kotter says that true urgency is a prerequisite to change. If you don't create any sense of urgency, it's going to be really hard to get your effort off of the ground. And he talks a lot about that urgency comes from not just logic and not just thinking. It's not just going to be data. You're really going to have to tap into people's hearts. And, notice how many of you mentioned in your beginning chat that leaders, one of the qualities was passion. And that's all about heart. I know people that I have found as great leaders and motivators had a lot of passion for the work. And they helped me feel like there was a sense of urgency and an importance in changing and, making sure that we were successful in our efforts. So you want to think about when you're creating urgency about an opportunity or about a change effort, that you tap into both the heart and the head. And then getting very clear and urgent about what it is that we're trying to change or what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to talk a little bit more about vision in a minute. Vision is sort of, what success looks like. Urgency is about your case for why there should even be change. And we want to we have to get to a sense of urgency to get over complacency, because complacency will really kill our change effort. We need to recognize complacency, and Kotter has a few examples about when you might recognize complacency. If you are delegating critical issues, that might be a sign of complacency. If we're only sort of talking to ourselves and not really going out and talking to customers or board members or community members, then we may be a little complacent. Other kinds of complacency might also show up as, shooting down data, blaming others. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was reflecting on this is if we tend to blame our funders or to say that the bureaucracy doesn't support change, that might be an example of complacency. So we want to get out of complacency, and we want to be sure that we aren't sort of creating false urgency, and that we are spending time on things, developing PowerPoints or, being in meetings all the time that sort of we feel busy, but it's really a sense of false urgency. So we want to create truly urgent behavior, and that means that we're going to need to get focused externally as well as internally. That we need to really be alert and we need to be moving fast. Urgency indicates that, there's a need to move and we need to move quickly. Relentless, continuously purging irrelevant activities to make way for the really important ones. That is, will create a sense of urgency and model and convey urgency. Tactics for building true urgency are bring the outside reality in. So, listening to customers, bringing customers in to talk to us about their experiences. Some of you are probably familiar with journey mapping. Journey mapping can really help create true urgency. We want to behave with urgency. If we have a crisis, we want to really use that to pursue our change and to create urgency. And then a leader just communicating can really build some urgency. Let's see. There seems like there was one other thing I wanted to mention there. So also a way to tap into urgency is to really think about what are the consequences if you fail at this change, and what's at stake for your success. So really thinking about what's at stake, what will be the consequences if we fail can also really help us tap into some true sense of urgency. So I would just sort of ask you, as you're shifting to your whole family approach or shifting to some other kinds of changes in practice or some other kind of change agent, what are you urgent about? What is the sense of urgency for this change? And really getting in touch with that and thinking about how you can articulate that. You might see when you delve into Kotter a little bit more deeply that he talks about creating a case for change. So your case for change is an opportunity to really articulate and communicate your sense of urgency. So let's talk a little bit about step 2, which is creating a guiding coalition. And this is really, in some ways, this is your linchpin of your entire effort. If you can do this well, if you can create a really powerful guiding coalition. As a leader, we know that it's not just one person that's going to lead a change effort. And so we've got to create a guiding coalition to help us. And powerful guiding coalitions include people from up and down and across the organization. They may include some board members. They may include some partners. What's important here is it's not just the usual suspects in your guiding coalition. We need more eyes to see, more brains to think, and more hands to do if we're really going to do better than we've ever done before, if we're really going to increase our impact and accelerate change. So we really want to get beyond the usual suspects. Your guiding coalition needs to have a shared objective. They need to have trust, and there needs to be the sense that the right people are a part of this guiding coalition, that the right people have the right power, the right expertise, the right credibility, the right wisdom and skills to really get this change off the ground. Kotter says we want no egos and no snakes in our guiding coalition, and you can imagine what that means. So, no egos. We don't want people who, are there for themselves or who may have a hidden agenda or their very own agenda. We don't want snakes, people lurking around who might undermine this change effort. Not that we don't believe in diverse viewpoints, but we want to be careful who we invite onto the guiding coalition, that they're going to be able to embrace a shared vision and help move forward. So as I said, we want a diverse many, not a limited few. We need to have a number of people working if we're going to be successful. And then Kotter really feels that it's important that people volunteer for the guiding coalition, that people have passion and power and they get to a place of they want to be a part of the guiding coalition versus they have to. And so, that is going to be important in thinking about how you invite people onto the coalition. And you could do that, a lot of different ways. So how can you enlist volunteers? If you perhaps if you have a change effort, if there's a big opportunity you're trying to invite people in to help you to pursue, maybe at all staff meeting there would be a discussion of the urgency of this issue, and the leader or a couple of leaders would present that urgency and then ask for volunteers to sign up to be a part of a guiding coalition. You might, as a leader, sit down and have a discussion with a few folks that you think would be right for the guiding coalition and invite them in and see if they're willing to volunteer. It's going to depend on what your change effort is. You might ask, how many people should be on our guiding coalition, and that really depends on what you're doing. Again, if you think about having the right power, skills, passion, that will help guide you in the number. But as you're going to see here in a minute, your guiding coalition is going to tap into even bigger network of folks. So we're not necessarily trying to include everybody on the guiding coalition that needs to be a part of the change. It is a smaller group of folks who are going to be working to achieve success. So you'll have to sort of look at what you're trying to do and then make some decisions about who the right folks are. So let's talk a little bit about developing a change vision. That's the third step in Kotter's process. And in my mind, this is really, as I said, guiding coalition is just pivotal, but so is vision. A vision really inspires people to take action. If we're going to ever succeed at a successful change effort in an organization, we're going to have a clear vision. 6 things that make a vision effective, according to Kotter. So in this case, where we're trying to seize an opportunity or get folks to embrace a new practice or a new approach, it needs to be bold, but as somebody said earlier, it needs to be achievable too. We need in our vision to paint a picture of the future. So our creating urgency sort of conveys the case for change, but the vision is going to tell you, what does it look like when we change? What does success look like? What does our future look like if we change? We want to appeal to people's hearts and minds in our vision. It needs to be specific enough to help people make decisions about trade-offs. If our vision is so broad that anything in the world could fit into it, then it's going to be hard for people to trade off making choices about doing this versus doing that. So we need it to have some specificity, but be flexible enough that it's adaptable to changing conditions, because we know that the world is constantly changing, and so we need to be flexible. And then, as if those first 5 weren't tricky enough, it's got to be easy to communicate. If our vision takes 20 minutes to explain to folks, it's going to be pretty hard for people to get behind it. So we've got to be able to, give it in an elevator speech in 60 seconds. So as you're thinking about your vision for the future, for this change or this opportunity, keep those 6 things in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit more here in a minute about vision because I think it is so critical. And as we're trying to make changes, whether it's a whole family approach shift or other, we need to really think deeply about vision. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But the final thing that I wanted to talk about with Kotter is what he calls his dual operating system. And this is how you're going to leverage more hands and eyes and hearts beyond your guiding coalition. So regardless of our change, We know we all have a hierarchy. We all work in an organization, in a community action agency, and there are different divisions and different programs in that organization. And the hierarchy, just like management is necessary, we need to have an organizational hierarchy. And in Kotter's sort of network, agile network, he sort of is maintaining that you have the hierarchy, but you also have this network. And at the center of the network is the guiding coalition, the folks you've invited to help you sort of be, deep thinkers with you on this change, to help you craft the vision, craft the strategies that will move towards success. But then you also invite people in to be different members of this network. And so each of these little pods might be a group that's working on a different strategy, a different approach to moving towards the successful change. And they're folks from all levels of the hierarchy, all levels of the organization. They're all volunteers. They all have different wisdom, skills, and abilities, but they're coming into this process and helping to make it a success. So this is how you sort of tap into a very broad network of folks to help make this change successful. And if you sort of can see there, he calls it a dual operating system because you have the hierarchy and you have this network or system of folks that are supplementing the guiding coalition and coming from different places. And even depending on the change that you're trying to make, you may even have folks from outside the organization who are part of that system, are part of your guiding coalition. Customers, board members, partners who may be a part of this. So that's how we're going to get success, is we're going to listen and involve a lot of different folks. And so what will that get us? Well, it'll get us many change agents versus just a few of the usual suspects working on this change. It'll help us tap into people who want to get to this mindset or want to get to this change versus a have-to mindset. We'll be using people's heads and their hearts versus just their heads. We'll have much more leadership and instead of just more management, because everybody in that network, everybody in that picture of the system is potentially a leader in this change effort. And we'll have two systems instead of just one organization or one hierarchy. And when you think about really being successful and overcoming the odds of change, this is the level that we need. We need to tap into the hearts and minds of many different people. We need to be able to learn and to engage folks in a whole new way. And that's what Kotter's process really helps folks to do. So it really increases the odds that you're successful by creating a structure that's maybe different than any structure or process you've used for change before. And the importance of this is, change is hard, as we know, and if we haven't sort of put this kind of structure around us when the going gets tough, when we have to do things like restructure staff or change data systems or take money that we were using for one kind of strategy and use it for something new, we won't be successful because we haven't put this level of network and system and learning and leadership in place. So when we're talking about something as important as shifting our practice, this is the kind of design we need to think about putting around so that that's successful. So I'm going to sort of talk more specifically about sort of applying Kotter's steps to, in our example here, moving to a whole family approach, because we have many community action agencies that are part of the Learning Community Resource Center who are thinking deeply about that. And you may be thinking deeply about something else at your agency, about some other kinds of change. I think these principles are all applicable, but I'm going to use a whole family approach shift as an example for the remainder of the webinar. So for some of you who maybe aren't familiar with a whole family approach, I just wanted to give you a little bit of that definition. So a whole family approach is when we're integrating services or systems change or policy change for parents and children at the same time. So we're trying to improve services or efficiency so that outcomes for parents, for their children and their families are all improved at the same time. And some characteristics of the whole family approach are family goals are shared across programs. Our goals include outcomes for children and parents and family. We align a suite of services for families that respond to their unique needs. It's easier for them to access services. And we have high quality, intentional parent and child services going on at the same time. And typically this is a framework from Aspen Ascend. We're looking at early childhood, post-secondary, economic assets, health and well-being, social capital. We're looking at all those components for both the parent and child. And in helping community action agencies shift to more of a whole family approach, the National Community Action Partnership has created these building blocks for preparing and pursuing a whole family approach. And each of these building blocks represents sort of a different type of issue that needs to be addressed. So whether it's building and using leadership, which we're talking about today, or whether it's changing agency culture or listening and engaging family voices, we can think about that inside the community action agency and then outside with our external partners. And so these are the building blocks that we think are necessary, and it's no accident that we're talking about leadership today because we think that's really one of the central building blocks. So what is the building block of using leadership to shift to a whole family approach? Well, it's really about getting a guiding coalition, getting a shared vision, looking at both the leadership inside the community action agency and outside the community action agency, and engaging, a range of folks to help think about changing practice to serve parents and children. So it may be articulating your vision, connecting the vision to the strategic plan, to other kinds of planning and designing you're doing in your organization, and really creating the capacity for agency change. And that's inside. And then with partners, it's very similar. Sharing your vision, serving as a catalyst in the community for folks to think about parent and child services together, providing support and resources for folks to come together as leaders and shift their practice on a community level. So if you are pursuing whole family and you're thinking about, well, how do I sort of apply Kotter? The first thing would be to sort of think about creating a case for change, creating a sense of urgency for why do we need to have parent and child services together. And when you think about the intergenerational poverty, when you think about the chances of a child who's born in poverty, moving out of poverty and into the middle class, it doesn't take much to create sort of a sense of urgency, to be able to articulate that urgency. And so here's sort of the first example of we're not going to be very successful in implementing a whole family approach if we can't sort of articulate the urgent need for serving parents and children together. And then we're not going to get very far in our agency with shifting our practice if we don't have a guiding coalition, that we haven't invited folks from across the agency to think with us about how we make changes and serve parents and children better. So we need to form a guiding coalition. And then finally, if we can't articulate what success would look like, if we can't articulate what our future would look like if we are serving parents and children together, we're also not going to get very far. So let me just say a little bit, I'm going to skip a few things here because I want to make sure we get to some other components here. So this is, if you look closely here, we've got some different colors, and they sort of represent different programs that community action agencies operate, whether it's LIHEAP or WIC or Head Start. And in community action, we can, and we do measure all of these programs. We identify the results that these programs are designed to achieve, and we're very good at that. And we've sort of got some examples there of some results that are achieved by your typical community action program. And then we have here the idea that, a certain number of families move out of poverty. And we've taken those colors from those different programs, and we've kind of created a masterpiece here of families moving out of poverty. And so the idea is that all of those programs are, those colors are blended, coordinated, woven together to help families be successful and move out of poverty. And so what I'm trying to convey here is that you can have a vision that's about operating and achieving different program results, or you can have a vision that success is moving families out of poverty. And those are very different articulations of a vision, but aren't they sort of different in the way they might motivate people and get people to work? So I wanted to just sort of give people a little bit of flavor here about the importance of thinking about your vision and articulating, and how important it is to articulate that vision. And so doing that helps you really zero in on what I call a North Star, that to achieve true impact for our customers, we really need to all be committed to a shared vision. We all need to be pulling in the same direction. And for community action, I think our guiding light is really, what is that shared vision? What does success look like? So I said earlier when we were talking about Kotter and vision, we were going to come back to that. I cannot emphasize enough that you need your guiding coalition, and you as a leader need to think about what is your North Star? What does success look like? What does your vision look like? And can you articulate that? And are you constantly communicating that so folks sort of understand where you're trying to go? So if we had more time today, we'd spend a little time talking about what your North Star is. But I would just sort of ask you, as a leader, maybe as a team that's pursuing a change, what is your North Star? What is success? What is your shared common agenda? And making sure that you get that articulated properly. So far I've sort of talked a little bit about using Kotter's process in your community action agency to pursue a change. And I wanted to also introduce to you in the little bit of time that we have left, the idea that you also, when we're making these changes to a whole family approach, or to trauma-informed care, or to improving equity in our practice, that we're going to have to engage folks outside the community action too. And I'm sure many of you have heard and read about collective impact. And I wanted to kind of introduce the idea today that you could use the collective impact process as a framework for moving your change process successfully on the level outside the community action agency. So if you haven't heard, collective impact is a way to organize people to solve complex issues and to bring in sort of cross-sector alignment and organization, coordinating many different players to solve complex problems across the community. And in this idea of collective impact, folks have the same goal. They have a shared vision, a common agenda, and they're measuring the same things. So there's just as Kotter has, his 8 steps of his process, this collective impact has, I think, 5 key elements for their effort. And the first one is a common agenda. So very similar. Here we have a shared vision, everybody getting on the same page and sort of pointing to that same North Star. And then you have to have a way to sort of measure, are we getting there? Are we moving towards our shared agenda, our vision? Have we realigned and coordinated our different services, our activities from all the different players that are a part of this collective impact effort? Are we communicating where we're going, what we're achieving? Are we building trust? And then finally, is there a backbone organization that's helping everyone in the community bring all this together? So this is interesting in the way that it overlaps with Kotter. So you might think about using Kotter inside your community action agency, but also these collective impact ideas could be useful inside your community action agency. Kotter's ideas, I think, are very helpful when you're thinking about collective impact and vice versa. So we're sort of asking you, when you're thinking about how do we successfully lead change, to think about some of these proven practices so that you can be successful and make a shift. We're going to have in this slide deck, when we post it, a number of slides here that go into a little bit more depth about collective impact. And just like when you're forming a guiding coalition, you have to really think about certain principles of collective impact, of giving priority to equity, including many different kinds of community members in the collaboration, recruiting cross-sector partners, using data, cultivating leaders with unique system leadership skills. So again, you see leadership, focus on program and systems. So it's not just about programs, building relationships and customizing for your local content and your local agenda. Creating, here it's interesting, we again talk about urgency for change. So just as Kotter sort of advises that you need to create a sense of urgency, that's also present in the collective impact framework. Bringing significant folks together around collaboration, having some champions, having a guiding coalition are all represented here too. And so then some pitfalls are sort of outlined about rushing through your common agenda, a shared purpose. You can't rush through that. Not allowing disparate views at the table is certainly a pitfall. Not celebrating quick wins along the way. Self-declaring that a certain organization as the backbone is problematic when you're doing collective impact. Confusing program collaboration with systems change. you really need both in most collective impact efforts, and not embracing that collective impact means doing things differently. So those are some pitfalls for you. You've got to build trust, and that's sort of key in all leadership, creating a culture of learning, leadership identification, and fostering connection. So we've got some more detail here about developing a common agenda for collective impact, which is very, very similar to the shared vision that I talked about with Kotter. So you'll be able to go back and sort of look through some of these slides. Your common agenda should answer these questions: how you're going to work together with the members of your coalition, what is and is out as far as boundaries and the problem that you're addressing, how you define success, your vision, how you're going to get to split up the work among your network and your coalition, and how you'll track progress and learn. So those are some of the common answers, the common things that you want to address in your agenda. So I'm going to ask you, I'd like to sort of have folks share with us in the chat, what here is resonating for you, what questions you might have about leading change. So just while you're sort of typing in your questions, and Courtney's going to help me sort of sift through those questions, I just want to just sort of say that if you think back to our building blocks that I showed you, and I mentioned that leadership is central, if you're going to be able to successfully embed change and move to a new way of practice, you're going to need leadership, and you're going to need some proven practices. And today we just sort of gave you a really quick scan of 2 practices that you could learn more about and use. Those are Kotter's 8-step process and his dual operating system, and then the collective impact framework. Both of those, there's a great overlap between those 2, and they would serve you well regardless of whether you're focusing sort of internally inside your organization or whether you're working with a broader community group. And hopefully some of you are doing both, because that would really be high impact to be working at both levels. So any reactions that you want to put into the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can perhaps unmute you and you can ask a question or share a comment about something that resonated. So I think that we have a question about if it's possible to implement any of this if the organization lacks leadership. And I guess that depends on what we mean by lack leadership. But I do want to just come back to something I probably just touched on, is that there really are leaders at all levels of the organization. And whether you are at the front line and you're a coach or a program director or an IT specialist, there are ways for you to lead within the organization, and for you to look for like-minded people to be able to maybe think about what it is you're wanting to change, and using some of Kotter's principles or some of the collective impact principles to begin to articulate, what is urgent, what is at stake if we don't act, and sort of finding like-minded people and articulating some of that. I think for significant organizational change, obviously the agency leadership needs to be involved, but there's different ways to nudge folks into making changes. Some folks think that this will be helpful to make some changes on some boards they're on. So that's helpful. We are all, we work in community action, but many of us volunteer and have other hobbies, and so probably some of this may translate into other parts of your life. So some folks are saying that the pitfalls were helpful. They've seen those, and it's good to sort of be reminded about what to stay away from. Anything else that folks are thinking about or reacting to? So I would just sort of say, again, that the importance of leadership, and leadership means, working a vision, forming a team, a guiding coalition to help move that vision, that all of that is going to lay the foundation so that when things get tough, and when I think about a whole family approach where maybe we're asking folks to change the way they do business, it will pay dividends if we have paid attention to some of these other things, like getting input from different levels of the organization and involving, folks who are leaders on the front line, leaders at the program level, some boards, some customers, because we'll be smarter about how we're going to pursue some of those changes when we've had a good, strong guiding coalition to help inform us. And then when we formed even a broader network to help move some of our strategies and our approaches. Okay, so one last opportunity for anybody to give any feedback or ask a question or make a comment. All right, so just a few future-looking items to recommend to you. Please, if you want to know more about collective impact or the whole family approach or service integration, a number of things that the partnership is really going deep on, you'll find that material in the resource library on the partnership's website, and you can look up, we have a number of webinars on collective impact, and they're all recorded there, and you can find those on the resource library. I mentioned collective impact. Courtney Kohler, who's on the call with us here today, has led a series of 4 webinars with the sort of leading thinkers on collective impact, and you can go back and listen to all of those webinars on how to create a common agenda and all those core things about collective impact on that webinar series. And then also continue to look on the calendar. Next week we're going to do, so leadership is foundational and it helps us to change organizational culture, but next Wednesday we're going to do a webinar on organizational cultures and systems, and Dana Jones from United Planning Organization, who's a great leader, led a great change effort at his organization, and he's going to share his experience with you next Wednesday at this time. So feel free to go on the events tab of the partnership website and sign up for that or future knowledge building webinars. And there's just a highlight of the resource bank, consultant bank, shared calendar, and all the things that are available on the partnership website. We also want to flag that if, leadership and organizational change and racial equity and many important issues are going to be highlighted at the Management and Leadership Training Conference in New Orleans in early January, January 15th through the 18th. So if this sort of piqued your interest about these kind of topics, please register and come to the conference. It's a great, great learning opportunity and a peer sharing opportunity for our network. And then finally, I think somebody asked about contact information. If any of these topics, any of the things that I mentioned today, you'd like to talk more about, or you have specific questions about your shift, your change effort, here's my email. You can email me or email any of the partnership staff who are also very steeped in these processes and resources, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. We're really here, the Learning Resource Center, as I said in the beginning, is here to build your capacity to do good things in the country and in the world, and so anything we can do to help you, we want to do that. So please do not hesitate. I love to hear from local folks about what they're doing and what they need, so feel free to email me. And then finally, just one parting comment. If we think the way we've always thought, we will get what we've always got. So we need to embrace change and figure out how to be successful. And together we can really create the confidence to act on our deepest convictions. I think all of us very deeply in today's world that we see, those of us in community action, we want to create change. And so I hope some of these processes and suggestions help you fulfill your sort of deepest convictions about improving the world. So with that, have a good afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.